the quiet of a small, dimly lit apartment, a heartbreaking discovery was made. One that would forever change the lives of those who uncovered it. Inside a cramped closet, 6-year-old Deshaun Martinez lay lifeless, his fragile body a devastating reflection of the neglect he had suffered. Weighing just 18 pounds, his skin drawn tightly over his bones, the sight was both unbearably sorrowful and impossible to ignore. His older brother, barely holding on to life, looked up with wide, frightened eyes, searching for comfort that never came. Once a place meant to nurture and protect, this apartment had become a silent witness to unimaginable pain, a place where childhood had been cruelly stolen. It was a typical day in Flagstaff, Arizona, filled with the sounds of children playing and laughter echoing through the neighborhood. But inside one apartment, a dark and disturbing reality was unfolding. When authorities received a call about an unresponsive child, they had no idea of the horror that awaited them. The call came from Anthony Martinez, a father in his mid-20s. He asked his mother to dial 911 after discovering his 6-year-old son, Deshaun, in critical condition. The boy was found in a bedroom closet, unable to move or speak. He was extremely underweight, looking as if he had been through a nightmare. The sight was chilling. As officers arrived, they listened to the parents' explanation. They claimed Deshaun's frail condition was due to a medical issue and an unhealthy diet that included caffeine pills. But their story began to unravel when they discovered Deshaun's 7-year-old brother hidden in the same closet. Unlike Deshaun, he was alive but barely clinging to life. This shocking scene revealed a family trapped in a cycle of neglect and despair. The officers could see the truth behind the parents' words. The boys had suffered far more than anyone should endure. In the beginning of 2020, Deshaun was just 6 years old, one of 4 children in a troubled home. He had an older brother who was 7 and 2 younger sisters aged 4 and 2. Due to the sensitivity of their situation, the identities of the siblings remained largely unknown. As the boys reached school age, their parents, Anthony and Elizabeth, made a shocking decision: not to enroll them in school. Instead, they kept them at home, but it was clear they were not being homeschooled. Details about Deshaun's early years are scarce, but what we do know paints a troubling picture of his struggles. When Deshaun was only 2 weeks old, he faced serious health challenges. He was admitted to the hospital for a urinary tract infection and sepsis. This led to high fevers and vomiting every time he tried to eat. For 10 long days, he received care as he fought to gain weight. After this ordeal, his parents were counseled on how to help him maintain a healthy weight. Despite their guidance, Deshaun's health continued to decline. By the time he turned 4, he weighed about 34 pounds, slightly below average for his age. However, just a year later, at 5 years old, his weight plummeted to a shocking 27 pounds, putting him well below average once again. It was a heartbreaking downward spiral that signaled something was terribly wrong in his home life. Deshaun's parents claimed they were waiting for food stamps to arrive so they could buy him fatty foods to help him gain weight. But that promise never came. They insisted Deshaun was always fed, yet he continued to lose weight. By the time he turned 6, he weighed under 20 pounds. Desperate for food, he and his older brother would wait until their parents fell asleep, then sneak into the kitchen to find something to eat. In early 2020, during one of these late-night scavenges, Deshaun and his brother were caught by their parents. This moment marked the beginning of a horrifying cycle of brutality. The boys were punished for trying to eat without permission from any adult in the home. It's important to note that Martinez was not just a bystander. She was present and actively participating in the cruel punishments. On March 2, 2020, everything changed when Anthony found Deshaun unresponsive in a bedroom closet. He called 911, but by the time officers arrived, it was clear that something terrible had happened. The paramedics rushed to revive Deshaun, but there was nothing they could do. He weighed a shocking 18 pounds at the time of his death, roughly the same weight he had been at just 1 year old. Witnesses described him as nothing but skin and bone. His ribs protruded painfully from his back, and his skin appeared stretched tightly over his fragile frame. His eyes were dark and sunken, adding to the haunting image of his condition. His older brother was found in a similar state, weighing only 27 pounds. The scene was nothing short of gruesome, a tragic testament to the neglect and suffering these boys endured, as their parents rarely fed them and often locked them in a tiny closet for long periods. The closet was far smaller than anyone could imagine, only 53 by 63 centimeters, about 21 by 25 inches. This meant there was no room for them to move, and if one tried to sit down, they had only 2 feet in front of them to stretch their legs, which was nearly impossible. For up to 16 hours a day, the boys were trapped in that dark space. They had no choice but to relieve themselves while standing there because they were only let out at certain times. Reports indicated that their parents used this cruel tactic to prevent them from stealing food in the future. The conditions of their lives were heartbreaking. The boys were suffering. They weren't getting the nutrition they needed. It was evident that their parents' actions were pushing them closer to despair. Investigators noted alarming timelines regarding when the children were fed. Breakfast often came as late as 11:30 a.m., and dinner was sometimes not served until after 5:30 p.m. This left the boys hungry for up to 17 hours between meals. When children are left alone and hungry, they often find ways to get into trouble. The boys would sneak into the kitchen, trying to grab whatever scraps they could find, often just bread. This was the meager food they were allowed. Instead of receiving help, they faced punishment whenever they attempted to eat. The adults in the household, all 3 of them, admitted to participating in this cruel behavior. They watched as the boys struggled, fully aware that 2 young children were on the brink of death in that closet. Yet none of them had the compassion to stop it. Instead, they condoned each other's actions. Questions arose about their awareness. Did they ever see Deshaun shrinking and think, "This needs to change, or he will die"? One adult claimed that as soon as food was available, it would be taken away again, and excuses were made about diets and trips to Phoenix that never materialized. Despite the horrors unfolding, there was a strange acknowledgement of love for the children. One adult expressed a motherly instinct, saying she never wanted her kids to be hurt and always wished the best for them. But wishing wasn't enough. Actions spoke louder than words. There were troubling claims about diet pills being given to the children. One adult said the kids thought these pills were candy, but she denied ever giving them anything to suppress their appetites. However, the children told a different story, saying they received these pills regularly. The conflicting accounts raised more questions than answers. As investigators dug deeper, they learned from the children's grandmother that she had tried to feed them properly. She described fights over food, particularly sweets. She wanted to give them more than their initial servings, but the adults in the house resisted her efforts. This struggle for nourishment painted a grim picture of a household where basic needs were neglected. In the final hours of Deshaun's life, his older brother was acutely aware of how serious the situation had become. He desperately tried to save his younger brother, but his efforts were in vain. The exact actions he took remain unclear, but it's heartbreaking to think of a 7-year-old filled with panic and worry for his sibling. Detectives described Deshaun as being in a non-life-sustaining state when they were found. Imagine being either of those boys for just a moment. Deshaun fought to survive alongside his brother until his body could no longer endure the pain and finally gave up. His older brother was left to witness this tragedy unfold, trapped in the same closet, helpless as he listened to Deshaun slip away. It's unfathomable what some parents can do to their own children. One adult speculated about the possibility of Deshaun being spanked too hard, leading to a loss of consciousness. "I wasn't there," they said, "but if something happened, I would have heard him cry." The fear of getting into trouble loomed large, raising doubts about how discipline was handled. The adults insisted they never meant to harm the children, but their explanations felt hollow. They pointed out that the girls in the household were well-fed and well-dressed, in stark contrast to Deshaun and his brother. It was clear that while the sisters received care, the boys endured neglect and suffering. Authorities quickly removed the surviving children from their home in Port Arthur after discovering the horrific conditions. Investigators noted that the sisters appeared healthy and had been eating regularly, suggesting they had not suffered in the same way as their brothers. However, Witnessing the trauma inflicted on Deshaun would leave lasting scars on them. Each child was taken into protective custody and placed in a foster home, but the older brother took longer to arrive because he was hospitalized first, clinging to life. Once settled in, he and his sisters were adopted by a woman named Marcy Roof, who hoped to give them a fresh start. At just 37 pounds and wearing a size 4, the boy's arms and legs were described as tiny, the size of a broom handle. Marcy spoke during court proceedings about the deep trauma the children had endured. The older brother would ask Marcy every 5 minutes when the next meal would be, even though he seemed terrified of eating or drinking water. It took him months to stretch his legs out straight again because they had become so atrophied from being locked in that closet for so long. The eldest sister remained silent for years after witnessing Deshaun's suffering, while the youngest sister was unafraid to share her memories. Her detailed accounts sent shivers down Marcy's spine as she learned of the horrors the children had faced. Marcy was truly an angel for taking in these kids, offering them love and understanding as they began to heal. Each one of the adults involved in Deshaun's tragic death was arrested during the investigation. It was determined that he had died because his parents refused to provide him with food or water, and his death was ruled a homicide. Anthony Martinez, the 28-year-old father, was tried and found guilty on 7 charges, including first-degree murder, 2 counts of child endangerment, 2 counts of kidnapping, and 2 counts of aggravated assault against a police officer. Following his conviction, Anthony Martinez was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for the horrific death of his son. In July 2023, Deshaun's mother, 29-year-old Elizabeth Arbeck, pleaded guilty to first-degree murder and child endangerment, receiving the same sentence. During her sentencing hearing, Elizabeth's words suggested that Anthony was the primary aggressor in their home. She took full responsibility for her actions, stating in court, "A huge part of me died along with my beautiful child. Not a day goes by that I do not grieve. I am so sorry." Several articles noted that Elizabeth felt powerless in her situation, enduring physical and emotional pain inflicted by Anthony and his mother. Her difficult childhood made it even harder for her to escape this cycle of abuse and protect her children. Elizabeth acknowledged the guilt of knowing her young boys were suffering while she ate and went to sleep beside her husband. Yet amid her sorrow, she expressed gratitude toward Marcy Roof for giving her children the life they deserved, finding some relief in knowing they were now in a better place. Managing 4 kids is a challenge, and it's clear that something was terribly wrong in that household. Why didn't they feed Deshaun enough? Did they even try to get help? Did they reach out to food banks or charities? One adult claimed they looked things up online for solutions but never went to the doctor because they were turned away. They had a smartphone but no computer, leaving them isolated in their desperation. When asked if they thought Deshaun might die, the response was shocking. They believed he would make it through the next weeks, despite his condition. There was no indication that he was acting differently, but it was evident he was suffering. Deshaun Martinez was an innocent child who wanted nothing more than love. He should have grown up alongside his siblings, exploring the world together. Instead, he became another defenseless child lost to neglect by those who were supposed to care for him. It is devastating that his siblings will carry the weight of his suffering for the rest of their lives. Deshaun deserved so much better. I pray he is now free and happy, resting in peace after being found deceased on March 2, 2020.